Chapter 97. Grandpa, elders, there's actually one more thing. Beside Elder Yi, Wang Chong did not immediately sit down. Oh! The elders looked on in surprise. Young Master Chong, just say what you want to say. Duke said. He had a very good impression of Duke Jiao, his youngest grandson. Regarding the matter of salt and iron, although the imperial court has not set up a project and all the memorials have not been issued, the imperial court has not yet approved it. But if we want to deal with the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates and reduce the number of weapons they obtain, there are other methods, and the imperial court will definitely swiftly approve these methods. Wang Chong composed himself and said. Wang Chong's cousin, Wang Li, already had an ugly expression on his face. All the limelight had been stolen by Wang Chong. Now that he heard him mention the ironware he had just mentioned, his face was so dark that it was about to drip water. Wasn't this embarrassing him in front of his face? Young Master Chong, what method are you talking about? The group of people asked curiously. The meaning of the Holy Emperor was very clear. Trade was absolutely impossible to prohibit. It was impossible to close the trade links between the Tang dynasty and all countries just to ban ironware. This was the reason why all the memorials had been left unpublished. Wang Chong actually said that he had a way to get the imperial court to pass his decision. This made the elders curious. Chong, don't speak nonsense. Everyone here is an elder. You don't understand what's going on in the imperial court, so don't talk nonsense. Wang Chong's uncle reminded him with a straight face. Wang Zhen's feelings toward Wang Chong were complicated. On one hand, the more outstanding Wang Chong's performance was, the smaller the chance of Li inheriting his father's position and influence as the successor of the family. But on the other hand, with so many of his father's old subordinates around, Wang Chong didn't just represent himself, but the entire Wang clan. Wang Qi no longer had any hope, Wang Fu wasn't outstanding enough, and Wang Bei was ruined. If even Wang Chong failed, his father's old subordinates and his students would look down on the entire Wang clan. As the saying goes, like father, like son. 100 beasts would submit to a fierce tiger, but they would never submit to a dog's son. Wang Chong's previous performance was already pretty good. Even as his uncle, he couldn't say anything about it. What Wang Zhen was afraid of was that he would slip up by speaking too much. If that happened, all of his previous efforts would go to waste, and all of his previous efforts would go to waste. Eldest young master, it's a good thing that young Master Chong has such thoughts. Let him speak. Old Ma also spoke up. Those present were all intelligent people, so how could Wang Zhen's thoughts be hidden from them? Wang Chong was only 15 years old, and he was not yet in touch with the affairs of the imperial court. Moreover, Wang Yan was a border general, so it was even more impossible for him to teach him. Because of this, the elders wanted to know how strong this 15-year-old kid was. Chong, it's fine. Go ahead, even if you're wrong, no one will blame you. Old Master Shen waved his hand and said in the hall. He treated all of his children and grandchildren equally. How capable one was, how high one's position would be. It was rare for his old subordinates and brothers to be here today. Since Wang Chong had already started the discussion, the rest was not up to him. This test would determine his future accomplishments, and he could already count on how much help he could receive from his old subordinates. And how capable Wang Chong was would be the crux of it all. Thus, grandfather. Wang Chong bowed deeply before continuing. Actually, it's very simple to suppress the output of metal weapons. All we have to do is raise the price of metal weapons. It's useless. Metal weapons are involved in all aspects of life. Small ones include pots, shovels, hoes, and so on. Large ones include weapons, armor, weapons. Raising the price of metal weapons will increase the burden on the lives of the commoners, and it will increase the expenditure of the imperial court on the military. On top of that, those clans that produce metal weapons, local clans, small workshops, mines, generals, and so on, all of these will cause a huge backlash. This kind of thing is absolutely impossible. At the end of the hall, a skinny white-haired old man spoke up. Wang Chong recognized him as Elder Zhao. Of grandfather's old subordinates, he was the weakest in martial arts. The reason was simple, he was the logistics officer. When grandfather was young, he was sent to the borders of the Great Wall, and he insisted on him serving as the logistics officer. He had to deal with the royal court and the local authorities. Everyone knew that logisticians had the most complicated tasks. But as long as Elder Zhao was around, all the trivial matters, bits and pieces, Elder Zhao would be able to handle them in an orderly manner. As soon as he heard Wang Chong's suggestion, he immediately knew that it was impossible. In order to contain the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate, he would lose sight of the bigger picture for the sake of small gains, neglecting the essentials and throwing himself into disarray. Everyone in the conference hall thought that Wang Chong would have some wise suggestion. But upon hearing those words, they were disappointed. After all, he was still young. He was only 15, so how could he possibly understand the affairs of the royal court? If raising the price could curb the production of metal weapons, they would have long resolved the matter. There would be no need for them to discuss it here. Hee, of course it won't work if it's just raising the price. Wang Chong smiled confidently. Sweeping his gaze across the room, he didn't seem discouraged at all. But what if we use tariffs? Tariffs? Surprised, Elder Zhao frowned for the first time. The other elders also had curious looks on their faces. They glanced at one another before turning to look at Wang Chong with interest. They had never heard of such a thing before. May I ask young Master Chong what tariffs are? I have spent half of my life dealing with finance, taxation, logistics. There is no tax that I don't know about in the Tang dynasty, but pardon me for my ignorance, but what exactly are tariffs? Elder Zhao said sternly, putting on a posture of humbly seeking guidance. This was also one of his strengths. Whenever he encountered something he didn't understand, he would ask without hesitation. Even in his old age, he was still the same. This was also the reason why the old master trusted him for half of his life and admired him so much. Seeing the gazes of the elders, Wang Chong couldn't help but chuckle. In his previous life, he had pondered over the matter regarding the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate for a very long time. Actually, tariffs could solve the problem. Even though in another world, tariffs were something that everyone knew of. But in this world, no one knew what tariffs were. The Tang dynasty had a household tax, a headcount tax, a market tax, a merchant tax. But the only thing it didn't have was tariffs. Most of the Abbasid Caliphate, Karaks, Spazanu, Turks, and Gogurians who came to the mainland to purchase goods enjoyed the same price as those in the Central Plains. Thus, even if the royal court cut off trade with the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate, these nomadic Khaganate could still obtain an endless supply of metal weapons from the Abbasid Caliphate, Karaks, Spazanu, and the Tang dynasty. And for a country that traded with 10,000 countries, this was extremely abnormal. The Tang dynasty had been doing business internally for a long time, and many people had not realized that there was such a thing as tariffs. Since they didn't realize it, Wang Chong felt that he had to remind them and make them aware of the existence of this thing. Grandfather and all the seniors. Salt and iron were special industries, especially ironware. In my grandson's opinion, there's no need to pay taxes when doing business on the mainland. This way, everyone can enjoy the preferential price, and it won't cause chaos. However, if someone were to bring these weapons out of the Tang dynasty and into Karaks, Spazinu, Abbasid Caliphate, or the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates in the north, they could set up checkpoints at the borders to collect taxes. This is called a tariff. Because these ironwares are no longer in circulation within the Tang dynasty, of course, the price can't be the same as inside. The tax rate can be doubled, tripled, up to 5 times the price. This way, it won't affect the internal price of salt and iron. Secondly, it can also bring a huge amount of additional revenue to the Tang dynasty. Because ironwares are sold in large quantities in large countries and political factors, they tend to be sold in large quantities. Thus, if we were to impose a tariff on ironwares, there would only be 2 situations. First, the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates would buy them in large quantities due to their overall strength, regardless of the price. This way, even though we wouldn't be able to stop them, we would at least be able to get a huge sum of money to subsidize the empire. Second, the price would be too high. The Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates would give up on buying them. That's even better. This way, even though we would lose a huge sum of money, we would be able to completely suppress the importation of ironwares into the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates, indirectly suppressing their fighting prowess. Isn't this our goal? Furthermore, the tariff is only limited to the salt and iron industries, the other industries wouldn't be affected. Thus, the Holy Emperor doesn't have to worry about the trade between the East and the West being affected. Of course, the tariff isn't limited to just salt and iron. Other goods can be taxed as long as the tax rate is appropriate. Of course, these are matters that the royal court needs to discuss. This isn't something that can be resolved by just a few words of mine. At the end of his words, Wang Chong glanced at his big uncle. Everyone in the conference hall had been listening intently to Wang Chong's words. At the start, they were still disapproving of Wang Chong's words, but the more they heard, the brighter their eyes lit up. Eventually, even Elder Zhao, who had vetoed Wang Chong's words, looked at Wang Chong in astonishment. If he hadn't heard it with his own ears, he would have never believed that a 15-year-old child would be able to spout such words. Tariffs, tariffs. These old fellows were only concerned about the threat of the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates to the north, and as more and more ironwares appeared, the country grew stronger and stronger. Thus, the most direct solution was to ban all ironwares and close off the trade with the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates. Or perhaps, they could just take Duke Jiao's eldest grandson, young Master Li, and wage a war against the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates to intimidate them. However, no one had ever thought that they could use something as tariffs to subjugate the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates without any bloodshed, thus banning their ironwares. Moreover, as an elder of the Tang Empire's politics and logistics, he was almost certain that His Majesty would definitely agree. In fact, even without much consideration, the people in the royal court would swiftly pass the resolution. This was especially so for the finance ministers. They would surely push for this matter with all their might. Xuezik and those finance ministers can find a few ropes and commit suicide out of shame. To think that they would think of all kinds of excuses to collect taxes from the commoners and suck their hard-earned money. But how could they not have thought of something as good as tariffs? Didn't the merchants of Karak's Spaznu and Abbasid Caliphate claim that they were rich? Despite having so many targets for taxation, they still didn't think of it. Chapter 98. Exactly, this is a serious dereliction of duty. This kind of thing doesn't even need us old fellows to say it. As long as we send a message to them, they will feel ashamed. We don't even need to say it. Duke of Hu chimed in with a smile. Wang Chong knew of Xuezik. This was the finance minister of the imperial court. Although people called him a vampire and scolded him for racking his brains every day to collect food from the people and collect taxes to fill the national treasury, Wang Chong knew that this person was not a bad person, nor did he have any selfish motives. The taxes he collected were basically all added to the national treasury. But he had not committed any corruption. Duke Jiao, young Master Chong is quick-witted. If not for the current prosperity of martial arts, he would only be wasting his talent. Otherwise, I would have brought him along with me. Elder Zhao looked at Wang Chong with a strange look in his eyes. This youngest grandson of Duke Jiao's was truly remarkable. It was already commendable for him to have such foresight when it came to military affairs, but to think that he would be able to do the same when it came to taxation as well. It was truly inconceivable. Old Zhao, you don't have to think about this. Duke Jiao has already agreed to have young Master Chong follow by my side. You don't have to think about him. Lord Yi was laughing and scolding him at the side, hurriedly trying to dispel his idea. Duke Jiao had 3 sons and a daughter, for grandsons, 2 granddaughters, and a nephew. Of all of them, only the youngest young Master Chong was the most eye-catching. You don't have to fight anymore. This child is still young. If he needs your help in the future, none of you are allowed to refuse. In the main hall, the old man was in a good mood. He looked at his old brothers and subordinates and spoke in a half-joking and half-commanding manner. Not at all, not at all. The elders hurriedly replied. They knew that even though Duke Jiao wasn't certain that young Master Chong would be his successor, it was clear that he intended to groom him. Did you hear what I said just now? You are an important minister of the imperial court. You must pay attention to this matter. Old Master Wang turned to Big Uncle Wang Zhen and said, "Yes, father. I will definitely handle this matter properly." Wang Zhen replied. Tariff was no small matter. To put it simply, it involved the empire's finances. It was a huge tax. On a grander scale, it was a matter of national and military affairs. It concerned the peace of the empire and the safety of hundreds of thousands of empire soldiers on the battlefield. If it weren't for the old master's birthday, he would have returned to the court and gathered his colleagues for a discussion. This was not just because they had a strong sense of justice, but because Wang Zhen could sense that this was a huge contribution. Whoever signed on it would receive a share of the credit. Given Wang Zhen's experience, he would definitely resolve this matter as quickly as possible. More importantly, Wang Chong was only 15 years old, so it was impossible for him to receive the credit. And as the person in charge of this matter, he would definitely receive the greatest benefits. This would definitely be a great addition to his political career. If he were to be promoted in the future, this would be his seniority. It could be said that Wang Chong was giving him a great credit. Right, young Master Chong, how did you think of tariffs? Duke of Yi suddenly asked curiously. At Wang Chong's age, it could be said that the Wang clan came from a family of generals and ministers. Wang Chong had grown up in such an environment, so it wasn't surprising for him to possess talent in this aspect. However, tariffs were different. This wasn't something that could be explained with just talent. Hee. Hearing those words, Wang Chong couldn't help but chuckle. He had said so much precisely for these words. Elders, you are overestimating me. I don't have that kind of ability. Actually, I heard it from my cousin once. What? Everyone was shocked and turned to look at Wang Li. Initially, Wang Qi's head was lowered, and his complexion was awful. But upon hearing those words, he abruptly raised his head and stared at Wang Chong in disbelief. Hee, cousin, it seems like you have forgotten about it. Back then, after you said those words, you immediately said that it was ridiculous. How could that be possible? How could those officials in the royal court listen to you? Back then, you were so engrossed in the military that you probably forgot about this matter. However, I heard it and recorded it down. Hee, cousin, you didn't expect this, right? As Wang Chong spoke, he even winked playfully at cousin Wang Qi. The reason why Wang Chong had said so much wasn't to show off before the elders and gain the limelight. Rather, it was to help his cousin Wang Qi as brothers. Wang Chong had always believed that his cousin wasn't a bad person. In his previous life, he had left home in a fit of anger and his whereabouts were unknown. However, when the Wang clan was in trouble, he still rushed back without hesitation. Even now, Wang Chong could still remember that when the Wang clan fell, he was forced to live on the streets and was bullied like a stray dog. In the end, cousin Wang Qi appeared in time and fought with those bullies. Furthermore, when he was injured, cousin Wang Qi used his back to protect him. Even though he said coldly things like, "I didn't do it for you, I just didn't like those people," and so on, Wang Chong knew that he was here to save him. From then on, Wang Chong knew that his cousin was a person who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. Regardless of how difficult it was to get along with him or how bad his temper was, it couldn't change the fact that they were both descendants of the Wang clan. From then on, Wang Chong knew that his cousin was a person who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. The matter of tariffs didn't bring much benefit to him, but Wang Chong knew that it was definitely beneficial to his cousin. Oh, there's such a matter? The first to speak was none other than Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang General. In the conference hall, the elders turned to look at Wang Qi. Wang Qi hesitated. Cousin, you've forgotten about it. A few years ago, when I went to look for my cousin, I happened to meet you. Back then, you were sitting alone on a fake mountain, muttering to yourself. Later on, you realized that I was eavesdropping and flew into a rage, saying that you would ban me from coming to your house in the future. Have you forgotten about it? Wang Chong's words were so convincing that even Wang Qi was confused. Young Master Li, is there really such a matter? The subordinates of the old master asked. It seems like it. Wang Qi hesitated. How could he possibly remember a matter from a few years ago? Furthermore, he had spoken so many words, how could he possibly remember everything? Congratulations, Duke Jiao. It seems like young Master Li is more talented in politics than in military affairs. Elder Zhao suddenly clasped his hands and congratulated the old master. Duke Jiao's eldest son, eldest young master Wang Zhen, was an influential official in the royal court, and he was talented in politics. Young Master Li had grown up in such an environment, and under the influence of eldest young master, it wasn't surprising for him to be talented in this aspect. If the idea of tariffs was thought up by young Master Li, then it would make sense. Li Gongzi is indeed talented in this aspect. If he were to develop himself in the political affairs, he might even catch up to eldest young master in the future. It wouldn't be impossible for the father and son to live under the same roof. The other elders nodded in agreement. In the hall, the old master frowned silently. He seemed to be moved by the idea as well. Actually, when his eldest grandson, Wang Li, was young, he had displayed talent in this aspect as well. He had an impression of it. However, Wang Zhen insisted on sending him to the military, and the old master rarely interfered in such matters. He was skilled in both civil and military affairs, so it was the same to him. However, if this idea was really thought up by Wang Li, then it might just be possible for Wang Li to follow his father's footsteps and enter the royal court. We'll talk about this matter in the future. Liu, you should thank your cousin, Wang Chong. If not for him, no one would have known about this idea of yours. The old master's words brought everyone's attention back to Wang Chong. Indeed. Young Master Chong isn't greedy for merit despite his young age. It's a good thing that fellow clansmen are willing to give in to one another. For young Master Chong to possess such character at such a young age, this is more valuable than anything else. In the conference hall, the elders looked at Wang Chong and complimented him. Their impression of him was even better than before. In the great aristocratic families, kinship was weak, especially in the families of generals and ministers. It was very rare for them to be able to give in to each other. Wang Chong's honesty and modesty didn't lower the others' impression of him. On the contrary, they viewed him even more highly. Young Master Chong, let's get closer in the future. Our Zhao clan has a few residences in the capital, so young Master Chong should feel free to visit us in the future. Elder Zhao and the other elders extended their invitations to Wang Chong. Wang Chong had the chance to be greedy for merit, but if he hadn't said it out loud, no one would have known. Regardless of whether it was in the royal court or the military, it was common for one to be greedy for merit. Even an influential official of the royal court couldn't avoid it. If a person was able to treat his subordinates fairly and not be greedy for merit, he would possess the ability to win the loyalty of his subordinates. Back then, there were so many people who followed Duke Jiao. Even if they had to climb a mountain of daggers or a sea of flames, they wouldn't even bat an eyelid. Wang Chong couldn't have known that this small matter had caused the elders in the conference hall to consider the possibility of him taking over the old master's position in the future. Even though it wasn't guaranteed that it would happen in the end, in everyone's eyes, Duke Jiao's youngest grandson already possessed the potential to unite the hearts of the people and lead all of Duke Jiao's students. In fact, even the most reticent old subordinates were considering this possibility. Wang Chong chuckled. He only felt that the elders' attitude toward him was a little weird, but he didn't think too much into it. Cousin Wang Li's talent in the politics of the royal court was indeed much greater than his talent in the military. This was something that Wang Chong firmly believed in. This kind of talent shouldn't be buried. Otherwise, not only would it be cousin Wang Li's loss, it would also be a loss for the entire Wang clan. Wang Chong believed that those who agreed with him here today would surely thank him in the future, and they would praise him for his foresight. After which, Wang Chong sat quietly by Duke of Ye's side. His performance was already sufficient, and going too far was as bad as falling short. Wang Chong didn't intend to shock the world. In the end, this was an opportunity for grandfather and his old subordinates to reminisce about their brotherhood. The weather has been too hot these few days, so there weren't many replies on the WeChat official account. This made Huangfu feel as though he was playing solo. Thus, he sent a WeChat message at 7 p.m., and in the end, wow. Chapter 99. One had to know when to stop. Wang Chong was certain that based on his previous performance, even if he didn't do anything, his grandfather would surely value and groom him, just like his big brother and second brother. However, what happened next exceeded Wang Chong's expectations. "Jenna, what's the discussion going on in the royal court right now?" The old master was chatting with his old subordinates when he suddenly asked about Big Uncle Wang Zhen. "Those who reside high in the imperial court worry about the people. Those who reside far away from the pugilistic world worry about the sovereign." Even though his old subordinates had already relinquished their authority, they were still concerned about the affairs of the royal court. Wang Zhen's lips moved slightly, as though he wanted to say something. However, after a moment of hesitation, he changed his mind. "There's nothing much going on recently, but the royal court is currently discussing the matter of changing protector generals to regional commanders and establishing 10 great regional commanders." Hearing the words regional commanders, Wang Chong's body jolted. He abruptly raised his head, and a storm seemed to have swept through his heart. Regional commanders. Wang Chong didn't expect to hear these 3 words here. This was the source of chaos for the empire. Wang Chong had always known of this matter, but he didn't know when it started. Because by the time Wang Chong realized this, it was already too late, the disaster already upon them. Just like everyone else, Wang Chong only knew of the results, but he didn't know the ins and outs of the matter. Yet, Wang Chong didn't expect to hear the words regional commanders in this private room. Furthermore, judging from Big Uncle Wang Zhen's words, this matter had already begun to sprout. Regional commanders, it's actually regional commanders, Wang Chong inwardly muttered. A storm raged in his mind. The matter of consort Taizhen had attracted the attention of the entire court. Wang Chong was sure that what first uncle wanted to say just now was definitely the matter of consort Taizhen. However, the clamor on the surface concealed the real crisis. When everyone's attention was drawn to the matter of consort Taizhen, no one noticed that the root of the empire's trouble had sprouted. Just like Wang Chong, if not for his eldest uncle mentioning it, he would not have noticed a major event that could destroy the empire in the future. Wang Chong was well aware that the matter of consort Taizhen was a big deal, but compared to the matter of the regional commanders, it paled in comparison and could not be calculated with logic. The consort Taizhen incident only affected the fate of King Qi and the Wang clan, but the regional commanders' incident affected the fate of the entire Central Plains. Even so, Wang Chong's gaze swept across the room. Big uncle, grandfather, elder Yi, Duke of Hu, elder Ma. Clearly, none of them had realized the severity of the matter. Even his big uncle Wang Zhen, as an influential official of the royal court, was the one who had the deepest understanding of this matter. Even so, when he spoke of this matter, he was only slightly moved. He had yet to truly understand the severity and danger of this matter. "First Gongzi, what's the matter with the regional commanders?" In the conference hall, Elder Yi asked with a slight frown on his forehead. "This is the latest news from the royal court. The Shi, Khitan, and Goguryeo in the northeast, the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates in the north, the Uzun in the west, the 6 Zhao in the south, the Abbasid Caliphate and Karak Spaz Inu in the west have been rising swiftly in the past few years. Every single one of them is growing stronger, more and more restless, and more aggressive." Hearing Elder Ye's words, Wang Zhen revealed the matter regarding the regional commanders without any hesitation. The empire is facing enemies from all sides, and the pressure it is facing is only increasing. Thus, they are considering removing the Protector General and appointing regional commanders. Other than their original responsibilities as Protector Generals, they will also be given the authority to govern 2 additional provinces. This will be done as they see fit, and the priority will be to fend off the enemies. Right now, the Prime Minister is doing his best to push for this matter. On top of that, the Prime Minister is proposing to break away from the usual practice of promoting the Hu based on talent to fend off the border invaders. Boom. Hearing the last sentence, Wang Chong felt as though a magnitude 12 earthquake had occurred in his heart. The true danger was always hidden beneath a calm facade. His eldest uncle was an extremely sensitive person when it came to politics, But even he probably failed to notice the true motive behind the Prime Minister's proposal. Break away from the usual practice of promoting the WHO based on talent to fend off the border invaders. There was another saying behind these 19 words, putting an end to border generals becoming ministers. Blessings never come in pairs, and misfortunes never come alone. The regional commander's policy and the WHO based on talent to fend off the border invaders became the two sharp blades that stabbed into the heart of the empire. They also became the two main reasons for the empire's swift collapse. I'm afraid this plan is a little inappropriate. The empire has never placed WHO border generals in such an important position before. Furthermore, there is no precedent in the previous dynasties for a border general to be in charge of administration, Elder Zhao said. He used to be in charge of logistics and military affairs, so he instinctively felt that there was a problem with this matter. However, he only felt that it was inappropriate for the WHO to be in charge of administration, but he didn't think too much about it. This is also the intention of the Holy Emperor. Big Uncle Wang Zhen said helplessly. I heard that the Prime Minister privately suggested to His Majesty that civil officials are too cowardly, lacking the bravery of a general. It would be better to use those poor WHO instead. The WHO are brave by nature, and they are used to fighting. As long as His Majesty grants them some grace, they will surely die for the cause. After His Majesty heard of it, he felt that it made sense, so he is seriously considering it. Everyone glanced at one another. If that was the case, and His Majesty was implicated, then it would be hard to say. After all, anyone who opposed it was equivalent to opposing the Holy Emperor. Furthermore, this plan wasn't necessarily wrong. Changing Protector General to Regional Commander, using barbarians to control barbarians, isn't impossible. Furthermore, the WHO are brave and warlike. After so many years of the Tang dynasty, these WHO have already assimilated into the Central Plains. In the era of Emperor Taizong, there was Chibi Hali, Ashina, and Yut. The current dynasties Zisili and Fomenlinta are all loyal officials of the royal court. If we use them well, just like what the Prime Minister said, those WHO generals will surely die for the cause. Duke of WHO nodded. As an old official, he had to learn not to go against the emperor on unimportant matters. This was the way of an official as well as the way of the bureaucracy. Even though it was a problem to use the WHO, Duke of WHO didn't think that it was a huge problem. As long as this plan is executed well, it's feasible. The 6 great protectorates have been around for nearly 100 years now. It's about time for a reform. Setting up regional commanders will make it easier for us to deal with foreign enemies first. This way, we won't have to waste time on documents. It's not entirely without merits. The other elders nodded in agreement. Ever since the establishment of the Tang dynasty, there had been more and more WHO joining them. During Taizong's reign, Chibi Heli had probably killed more WHO than his own tribesmen. Furthermore, under the influence of the Central Plains, many of the WHO had been influenced by the Han. In fact, they had even taken Han names. Take Bai Xiaoda for example. If he didn't say it out loud, no one would know that he was the crown prince of Kucha. He was often summoned by the emperor to the royal palace to pay his respects. Compared to their original tribes, these vassals WHO had undergone a great change. In fact, there were even quite a few who had joined the army by the borders. When they fought against the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate, they didn't hold back at all. Thus, the elders wouldn't be too prejudiced against them on this point. Furthermore, factional strife had always been a great taboo in the previous dynasty. In the previous dynasty, Zhou Chang had even implicated the old King Song in prison for 3 months because he had formed a faction, suffering a great deal of physical pain. All of them knew of this. It wasn't impossible for His Majesty to put an end to factional strife and utilize the WHO. The more Wang Chong heard, the more awful his complexion became. Eventually his face warped. Putting aside the people outside, everyone in the conference hall was an old official of the royal court. They had great foresight when it came to military affairs. They could sense the threat from the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate in the north, but none of them realized the dangers of the regional commander's policy and the utilizing the WHO policy. Even grandfather's old subordinates couldn't do anything about it. Needless to say, the people in the royal court, Wang Chong finally understood how that policy had been passed in the royal court back then. Impossible. This was absolutely impossible. Wang Chong couldn't hold himself back any longer. If no one in this conference hall could realize the dangers of this matter, then no one in the entire royal court, no one in the world, would be able to do so. By the time the deed was done, the outcome would be set. By then it would be too late to say anything. Those who speak too much are bound to slip up. Wang Chong had already made up his mind to not speak anymore. However, if he were to remain silent on such a matter, Wang Chong would never be able to forgive himself. With Wang Chong's interruption, the entire conference hall fell silent. Everyone turned to look at Wang Chong, who was seated quietly beside Elder Yi. Young Master Chong? The elders in the room were astonished. Wang Chong's sudden outburst left everyone in the room in shock. Even the nearby elder turned his head to look at Wang Chong in shock. The impression that Wang Chong had given him previously was excellent. He was polite and insightful, and he was extremely respectful to the elders. However, the other party's behavior at this moment was completely out of his expectations. While the elders were chatting, and they had already reached an agreement on the matter regarding the regional commanders, Wang Chong's sudden appearance could be said to be extremely rash and impolite. Wang Chong, what are you doing? Do you have the right to speak before the elders? Hurry up and sit down. Wang Zhen's complexion also darkened, and his face darkened. It wasn't easy for him to leave a good impression on the elders. Wasn't Wang Chong ruining his own future? The old master didn't say a word, but his thick white brows couldn't help but frown. This child of his third son, Wang Yan, had left a good impression on him. But no matter how good he was, he had to have a good reason to offend the elders in such an occasion. Why are you acting so serious? Young Master Chong, if you have anything to say, just say it. In the end, it was Elder Yi, who had come from the military and exuded a killing aura, who spoke up to ease the atmosphere. He had a good impression of Wang Chong. Even though he was surprised by Wang Chong's abrupt action, Yidong believed that there must be a reason for this child to do so. Chapter 100. The voices of the crowd sounded distant yet close at the same time. Wang Chong's thoughts drifted far into the distance. In order to facilitate the management of the military, the Tang dynasty established 6 protectorates in its initial stages. They were the Anong, Anan, Shi, Bei, Chanyu Protectorate Manor, and Baiting Protectorate Manor. The 6 protectorates were responsible for consoling, subjugating, reporting, and punishing. However, in essence, they were still purely military organizations, and they didn't possess any administrative authority. Through the 6 protectorates, the royal court suppressed the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates, Uzan, the various kingdoms of the western regions, Goguryeo, and the other barbarian powers. However, in the current dynasty, the 6 protectorates were abolished, and the 10 regional commanders were appointed instead. The protectorates were changed to regional commanders, taking over the responsibilities of the protectorates and the 2 surrounding continents. On top of that, the administrative authority of the protectorates was increased, and everything changed. No one knew better than Wang Chong what the future would be like. Of the 10 regional commanders in the Central Plains, the 6 strongest regional commanders in the north would fall into the hands of the Hu. Anxi Regional Commander Gao Xianji, Longyu Regional Commander Geshu Han, Shuofang Regional Commander Nci, and the 3 regional commanders of Pinglu, Lulong, and Donghe would fall into the hands of the Hu. The positions of these regional commanders might have belonged to the Han initially, but sooner or later, they would all fall into the hands of the Hu. Of the 10 regional commanders, 6 of the most important positions were in the hands of the Hu. Hundreds of thousands of elite soldiers were in the hands of outsiders, causing the defense of the Tang dynasty to be weak on the inside. This was the source of chaos for the royal court, as well as the source of chaos for the Tang dynasty. But at this moment, no one had noticed it. Even Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, and Elder Zhao didn't notice the danger, and this made Wang Chong feel a deep pain in his heart. Even though the Tang dynasty had Hu generals in the past, be it Chibi Heli during Emperor Taizong's reign or Zisili during the early stages of the current dynasty, they were just ordinary generals, and the authority they wielded could be retracted at any moment. However, the regional commander's strategy and the decision to utilize the Hu would change everything. The Hu people will break free from the category of generals and become a small court at the border. Because they had the right to act at their discretion, the imperial court would no longer be like the previous imperial court, casually transferring them back to the capital and stripping them of their military authority. They were like ferocious beasts, and the imperial court was loosening the shackles on them. Grandfather, old Yi, old Zhao, old Ma, and first uncle, no matter what, you must not do this. We must not set the precedent of the regional commanders and use the Hu. No matter what, we must stop them. Wang Chong said. Everyone in the meeting hall frowned, but no one said anything. They just waited for Wang Chong to continue. Wang Chong's expression was solemn. In front of all the seniors and uncles, he knew that his words carried little weight. All the seniors here were more senior than him. However, the matter of the regional commanders was of great importance. The slightest mistake could lead to the destruction of the common people. Even if no one believed in him, Wang Chong had to give it a try. Grandfather, elders, the imperial court has already done all it could for the Hu in our territory, and we have done our utmost. Chibi Heli was a Hu, but he was able to obtain the trust of Emperor Taizong of the Great Tang and was given the position of Grand General of the Left. After his death, he was posthumously conferred the title of Grand General who supports the state and governor of Binzhou. He was buried in the Zhao Mausoleum with the title of Lai. Ashina, the Hu as well, was conferred the title of Great General of the Left Cavalry. After his death, he was conferred the title of Great General who supports the empire and governor of the Binzhou. He was conferred the title of Yuan. Both of them were Hu, but due to the glory they enjoyed in their lifetime, they were able to achieve higher positions than many Han generals. In fact, they were even conferred the title of Hu to be buried in Emperor Taizong's Zhao Mausoleum. Other than the Tang dynasty, who else could achieve such glory? Also, Zhishir Sili of the current dynasty was conferred a marriage by the previous emperor, marrying a princess. How many Han people can obtain this honor? Right now, to the north of the Tang dynasty, the Anbei Protectorate Manor and Chanyu Protectorate Manor have formed an alliance of Hu and Han. Regardless of whether they are Hu or Han, the imperial court has treated them equally. This is already the limit. But have you all considered what would happen if we were to further utilize the Hu on this basis? Wang Chong faced the gazes of the crowd and said, even though he was only 15, the imposing aura that Wang Chong exuded far exceeded that of his age. None of the elders on the floor dared to treat Wang Chong as a child. Instead, they subconsciously followed his train of thought along with his tone. The Hu are innately valiant, a result of their harsh living environment. Just like that poem mentioned, while our 10-year-old Han children are still pursuing luxurious pleasures, the 10-year-old Hu children are already riding horses and shooting arrows. With such a mix of Hu and Han soldiers, it's obvious who will stand out. Big Uncle said that Lord Prime Minister mentioned that the Hu are innately valiant and are used to fighting. Due to their poor background, they won't easily form factions. This is true, but I wonder if Lord Prime Minister has considered that while the Hu won't form factions like the Han, the Hu themselves are a huge faction. Regardless of which tribe the Hu are from, when they mix with the Han, they will become a faction. Wang Chong said gravely. Currently, the mixing of Hu and Han was only limited to the Biding Protectorate Manor and Chanyu Protectorate Manor. However, Wang Chong was well aware that once the regional commander system was established, the mixing of Hu and Han would spread from the north to the other regions. Furthermore, with the policies of the Hu and the Han, future Hu generals would appear in the various military regions of the Tang dynasty. Note, Hu refers to Hu. In the conference hall, many people thought that Wang Chong was being too rash, but upon hearing this, their faces immediately warped. There was a subtle change in the atmosphere. Wang Chong's way of thinking was completely different from theirs. Forming factions for personal gain was a huge taboo in the history of the Tang dynasty. As a result, everyone only paid attention to this point, neglecting the fact that the Hu in the inner circle were extremely easy to group together and naturally formed a large faction. On this point, Wang Chong wasn't wrong. We have neglected this matter. This child's words aren't without reason. Elder Ma, Duke of Hu, and the others, who didn't pay much attention to the regional commander's system and the important Hu strategy, gradually changed their attitude. The Hu and Han are born different, and the difference in their appearance makes it easier for them to form a tighter group. While it's true that they won't form factions for personal gain, this group is likely to be even more dangerous than the factions that the royal court is worried about. With the current policies of the royal court, the Han are still able to suppress the Hu. However, if we were to build on this foundation and utilize the Hu, everything would be different. Wang Chong paused for a moment. Recalling his previous life's experiences, he couldn't help but feel sorrowful. Given his current strength, there was nothing he could do. At his 15-year-old age, others would only treat him as a child. No one would think much of him. Thus, he could only make use of this occasion and the elders before him to convey the danger and warning in his heart. Elders, we Han have been brought up by etiquette. If a Han were to become a general, in order to show impartiality, he would surely reward and punish fairly, and he would generously promote the Hu. However, I would like to ask, if a Hu were to become a general, would he generously promote a Han as well? Wang Chong asked. The elders in the conference hall were dumbfounded. Even Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang Zhen, frowned. Even though he was seated high up in the royal court, the Han generals in the army valued talent and rewards and punishments fairly. As long as the Hu were capable, they would generously promote them. The reason why there were so many Hu generals in the army was because of the rewards and punishments given to Han generals. If not for the promotion of Han generals, there wouldn't have been so many Hu generals in the army. On the other hand, if a Hu were to become a general, it was hard to say whether a Han would be promoted as well. This was something that not even the elders in the conference hall could guarantee. Wang Chong's gaze swept across the conference hall as he shook his head. No one knew better than him what would happen in the future. The famous general of the Tang dynasty, Wang Zhongxi, promoted Big Dipper General Geshu Han, but who did Geshu Han promote? Huabagern was his subordinate, and he often brought him with him. Anxi Protector General Fomin Linta was promoted by the current Holy Emperor, but who did Fomin Linta promote? Xinluo's Gao Xianji. Gao Xianji had replaced Fomin Linta, but who else did he promote? Feng Chongqing. However, it was a pity that he was only an official in charge of logistics. Of all of them, he could be considered as someone with a conscience. And the future Yuzhou regional commander, the current famous general of the Tang dynasty, the Guazhou provincial governor Zhang Shogui, was about to do something even more astonishing. The Hu that he promoted would shake the foundation of the empire and push this powerful empire into the abyss of internal strife. The people of the divine continent would be plunged into misery and suffering. And all of this happened under the background of putting Hu Jiang in an important position and the regional commander system. Putting Hu generals in an important position caused the Hu in the army to promote the Hu, resulting in the emergence of a large number of Hu generals. The regional commanders' system pushed them to the peak and gave them the ability to wreak havoc in the Central Plains. Grandfather, elders, and big uncle, the talents of a general shouldn't just include bravery. It should also include commanding troops, formations, logistics, and political affairs. If we only focus on bravery and blindly promote the Hu, the number of Hu generals in the army will only increase and the number of Han generals will decrease. As the saying goes, a general's success is built on the bones of 10,000. We Han generals are different from Hu generals. Only through constant tempering on the battlefield would they continue to grow and gradually show the demeanor of a great general. And this kind of general is far more formidable than the Hu generals. But if we only focus on bravery and only on talent, we will only put the Hu in an important position. If the Hu were to promote the Hu while the Han are not tempered, the number of Han generals will decrease. On the other hand, the number of Hu generals in the army will only increase, and the Hu will form an independent body. If the Hu were to become the commander-in-chief, I'm afraid that the path of the Han generals will be completely blocked. In fact, there might even be a situation where the leaders of a pure Han army are all Hu, and the army will only follow the Hu's lead. Not only so, once the regional commanders system is implemented. Once the Hu become the regional commanders, there will be a large number of Hu generals in the army. All of them will control their troops and listen to orders but not to orders. In the end, they will even threaten the central government and the royal court. By then, the Tang dynasty will be left empty, and I'm afraid that a situation will occur. If the Hu were to gather together and cause chaos, who will be able to stop them? Who will be able to defeat them? If this goes on, the royal court will lose control, and I'm afraid that there will be a military town separatist regime in the future. Wang Chong lamented. What? Boom. It was as though a bolt of lightning had landed in the hall. Hearing the words military town separatist regime, everyone in the hall was shocked, as though they had just experienced a Category 12 hurricane. Even Wang Chong's cousin, Wang Li, who had been pretending to be asleep, trembled violently. He opened his eyes abruptly and looked at his cousin in disbelief. Military town separatist regime, this is not a small matter. If what Wang Chong said is right, this matter will probably shake the entire Tang dynasty. At the top of the hall, Wang Chong's grandfather was originally seated on the high seat, but at this moment, he suddenly stood up with his hands on the seat. Chapter 101. The Regional Commanders Incident and putting the Hu in important positions were just minor matters. There were many similar discussions in the royal court every day. Moreover, if the strategy of using the Hu came from the Prime Minister and the Holy Emperor had agreed to it, then it would be even more difficult to oppose it. It was not worth it for such a minor matter. But at this moment, after hearing Wang Chong's words, no one thought that this was an insignificant matter. In the hall, a hint of shame even appeared on the faces of the elders. This was no minor matter. On this matter, they, the old officials, had made a grave oversight. There was a moment of silence in the meeting hall. Everyone was still reeling from the shock of Wang Chong's final words. The separation of military towns was no minor matter. This was a massive wave that could shake the entire Empire State Building. When they thought of how the crowd had thought nothing of it, the elders felt a lingering fear. The Hu were using the Hu and promoting the Hu. This was not a possibility, but a fact. They had already shown signs of this in the past, and Wang Chong had only formally brought it up. The Hu learned horsemanship and archery at the age of 10, while the Han were still studying, writing poetry, or farming at the age of 10. In this aspect, the Hu had an innate advantage. If it really was as Wang Chong had said and the officers in the army, from the bottom to the top, were all monopolized by the Hu. If the Han were to lose their path to promotion, then the survival of society would be in danger. Wang Chong said nothing, but the throbbing in his heart was no less than the others. Wave after wave of memories surged through his mind. When he thought of what had happened in his last life, Wang Chong felt an incomparably heavy weight weigh down on him. The regional commander system and the important Hu strategy had caused the Tang dynasty to sink into the chaos of the separation of military towns. The history of the Tang dynasty, in its most resplendent moments, had been written by the Hu and foreigners. Geshu Han, Gao Xianji and Sishan, Kang Yaoyuishan, Fomenlinta, of the generals here, was there a single one who was a Han? Were there really no famous generals in the entire Tang dynasty? If the Han really couldn't produce a famous general, how could Great Qin resist the Xiongnu when they were at their strongest? If the Han really couldn't produce a famous general, how could Great Han chase the Xiongnu into the Yin Mountains? If the Han really couldn't produce a famous general, how could Great Han promote Geshu Han's famous general, Wang Zhongxi? What about his grandfather and his old subordinates, who had led the troops outside the Great Wall to confront the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates? The strategy of regional commanders and utilizing the Hu had caused Tai A to fall into a disadvantageous position, completely blocking the path of a Han general's promotion. When that great wave of turmoil arrived, the brightest generals and generals of the Tang dynasty, as well as the generals of the Hu and other races, were all killed, leaving Wang Chong with a dark starry sky. In the sky of the Tang dynasty, the general star was dim. Other than Wang Chong and a group of old seniors, there was nothing else. Life would eventually come to an end, And once those venerable seniors left, Wang Chong felt an unprecedented loneliness, pain, and helplessness. What did it feel like to stand alone by the sea, fending off the sea? What did it feel like to stand alone by the wind, fending off the storm? What did it feel like to stand alone by the mountain, facing the endless darkness? Loneliness, endless loneliness. That was how Wang Chong felt back then. Even though he had given it his all, he was unable to change the fate of the Tang dynasty and the Central Plains. Pain seeped into his bones, and it felt as though blood was dripping from his body. Everything that had happened could be traced back to this storm before their eyes. His Majesty will be arriving soon. I need to think about this matter carefully before reporting it to His Majesty. Chong, you should leave first. Brothers, you should rest for a while as well. In the main hall, the old master suddenly spoke. As a retired minister of the Tang dynasty, the old master had been through many storms. There were very few things that could cause his emotions to fluctuate. But at this moment, everyone could hear a slight tremble in the old master's voice. Clearly, the agitation in the old master's heart had reached a boiling point. Everyone could smell the scent of a storm from it. Given the old master's current standing, any word or action he said would cause a huge commotion in the royal court. The old master rarely interfered in the affairs of the royal court. But if he were to interfere, it would definitely cause a huge backlash. Grandfather, I'll be taking my leave. Wang Chong straightened his body and bowed. He had already done his best today. No matter what the final outcome would be, it wasn't something that he could control. At the very least, he had done his best. Wait a moment, young Master Chong. Just when Wang Chong was about to leave the conference hall, one of the old subordinates of the old master who had remained silent all this time stood up from his seat. Elder, what's wrong? Wang Chong turned around in astonishment. Ah, Xianxia, come here. Pay respects to young Master Chong. The white-haired old man smiled and beckoned behind him. Elder son. Wang Chong was taken aback for a moment. Then he recovered from the shock and rejoiced. Grandfather's old subordinates would often bring their descendants to the Four Quarters Embassy to visit grandfather. This was a form of respect, as well as the continuation of their relationship. It was to allow these descendants to get to know Duke Jiao so as to continue the family line. However, even so, grandfather's old subordinates wouldn't allow them to come into contact with anyone other than the old master. They came in a hurry and left in a hurry. While the old master was reminiscing with his subordinates, they would listen obediently by the side, not saying a single word. Regardless of whether it was his big brother, second brother, or cousin. He had never interacted with them before. But now, his grandfather's old subordinate, elder son, actually had his grandson address him as young master. This was something that had never happened before. Wang Chong understood the meaning behind this simple action. This was an act of submission and loyalty. Elder son was trying to get his grandson to submit to him and be loyal to him. In the future, when the two of them grew up, even if the old master passed away, the Sun clan would continue to support the Wang clan. This was an inheritance of authority. Without a doubt, elder son was using this most direct method to express his high recognition of him. This was something that had never happened before. At this instant, Wang Chong subconsciously turned to look at his grandfather. He Chong, go. The old master was taken aback for a moment before chuckling. He didn't expect such a sight either. This son Buren, with a temper like a rock in a cesspool, had really given him a pleasant surprise. Ning, Xiaozhu, what are you two still standing there for? Hurry up and greet young Master Chong. At the same time, Elder Ma stood up and beckoned the children behind him with a smile. Old Ma, old son, I can't let you two monopolize this matter. The more I look at young Master Chong, the more I like him. I can't let you two old men snatch him away. You fellows, hurry up and come over. In a moment, your young Master Chong will be snatched away by those two old fellows. Duke of Hu shouted behind him. He didn't rush them. Instead, he carried them with both hands as though he was carrying a ball and flung them out. The two children were quick-witted. They weren't injured in the slightest after falling to the ground. They quickly ran over and squeezed together with the others. They surrounded Wang Chong and called him young Master Chong non-stop. At the same time, The other elders also sent their descendants out. In an instant, the entire conference hall was filled with cheers. Upon seeing this sight, the elders couldn't help but chuckle. "I've finally succeeded." Wang Chong looked at the faces around him that were of the same age as him or even slightly older, and he couldn't help but feel excited. The old subordinates of the old master were known for being difficult to deal with. It was harder than ascending to the heavens to gain their recognition. Big brother, second brother, cousin, little uncle, uncle, father, big uncle, and the others had all failed miserably. Wang Chong didn't expect that he would be able to gain their recognition during his grandfather's birthday banquet. Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, Elder Ma, Elder Zhao, and Elder Sun had already acknowledged him. All of the important subordinates of the old master had acknowledged him. In that instant, the joy in Wang Chong's heart was indescribable. As long as he had the help of these people, the aid he would receive in the future would be boundless. Young Master Chong. As Wang Chong was lost in his thoughts, a mellow, firm, and meticulous voice suddenly rang out in his ear. When Wang Chong came back to his senses, he immediately saw a youth of 16 or 17. His shoulders were broad, and he was even taller than Wang Chong by a head. His head was lowered, and he was obediently standing on top of Wang Chong, his expression extremely respectful. Upon seeing this young man, Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. Zhao Jingdian. Looking at the stoic young man before him, there was only a single thought in Wang Chong's mind. "My good brother, we meet again in this life." In that instant, time seemed to have slowed down countless times. Looking at this familiar yet unfamiliar face, Wang Chong's eyes reddened. All of a sudden, an indescribable feeling welled up in his heart. "General, let's meet again in our next life." In that instant, something seemed to tear through his heart, traversing through countless time and space. Wang Chong seemed to see a figure who had been through blazing flames riding on a war steed. Amidst the blazing flames and the neighing of the war steed, the figure galloped off resolutely, leaving him with no regrets. "My good brother, there's no need for an afterlife. In this life, we will still be good brothers." Wang Chong stared at the figure before him. The resolute figure in his memory overlapped with the wooden figure in front of him. Wang Chong felt a lump in his throat, but at the same time he felt a sense of relief and joy. "We are brothers from our previous life, and we are finally reunited in this life. I am Wang Chong." Chapter 102. In truth, as soon as Wang Chong stepped into the conference hall, he had already noticed Zhao Jingdian. However, before all the elders in the hall, Wang Chong couldn't possibly rush over recklessly to acknowledge Zhao Jingdian. Furthermore, even though he remembered Zhao Jingdian might not remember him. In his previous life, he wasn't able to step into the conference hall to get to know Zhao Jingdian. It was only many years later when they met and exchanged names that he realized that their grandfathers were master and servant. From then on, Zhao Jingdian became his best brother, and he would never abandon him until the very end, the final battle. This was the only regret in Wang Chong's heart. And in this life, he had finally made up for this regret. "Good brother." Even though Zhao Jingdian was shocked, Wang Chong was overjoyed. This was probably the happiest moment of his day. "I don't want to acknowledge you as my young master." Just as Wang Chong and Zhao Jingdian were about to acknowledge each other, the piercing voice of a young lady suddenly sounded. In an instant, the entire conference hall fell silent. Everyone turned their gazes toward the source of the voice. Not far away, there was a 16 or 17-year-old girl. Her face was exquisite and beautiful, and her hair was tied in a ponytail. Her expression was arrogant and stubborn, and she was struggling to break free from her grandfather's grasp. "Ping, listen to me and stop fooling around." Being stared at by a group of people, including his old brothers, old Ye's expression became embarrassed. His face turned red, and there was no need to mention how embarrassed he was. "I said that I don't want to. Look at him." The young lady who was addressed as Ping suddenly raised her jade-like finger and pointed at Wang Chong. In an instant, everyone's gazes moved from Ping to Wang Chong. With such a low cultivation realm, origin energy tier 5 or tier 6. How can I, Yinping, acknowledge a weakling as my young master? Yinping pointed at Wang Chong with disdain and contempt on her proud face. This is awkward. Wang Chong was also speechless. This big sister's eyes of fire and gold were actually able to see through his cultivation with a single glance. Even his breakthrough to origin energy tier 6 couldn't escape her eyes. Wang Chong couldn't refute the fact that he was being looked down upon in public. This was because Wang Chong knew that in his past life, he was an existence that he could only look up to. He did have the right to speak like that. In his previous life, Yinping was one of the few talented ladies in the Great Tang Army. Of all of grandfather's old subordinates, including the Wang clan, there probably aren't many whose talent can compare to this peacock-like proud young lady. Her younger sister, Wang Xiaoyao, might be able to slightly surpass her, but her younger sister had been practicing martial arts for 3 days and drying the net for 2 days. With this kind of drive, she probably wouldn't be able to catch up to her in this lifetime. Cousin Wang Zhuyan's cultivation was indeed higher than hers, but she was older as well. Old Man Ye's granddaughter was a true genius. Not only was she talented, she was also very hardworking. Wei Hao could be considered to be working hard, but he was incomparable to Yi Yinping. That was because the other party only slept 4 hours a day, and she spent her nights cultivating. Thus, even though she was only 16 to 17 years old, she had already reached true martial realm, a feat that even Yao Feng couldn't match up to. If not for the fact that only males were ranked according to seniority in the capital, Yi Yinping would have already made a name for herself. Pinga, how can you speak like that? Young Master Yi is Duke Jiu's grandson. Hurry up and apologize. Old Man Yi panicked and reprimanded with a stern face. The reason why he brought this child over to meet with Duke Jiu this time was so that the Yi and Wang clan could continue the friendship of the previous generation. Furthermore, Wang Chong was a decent child. Of the many descendants of Duke Jiu, he was the only one whom he and his brothers were most satisfied with. They were still thinking of how to groom him in the future. Never did they expect that they would smear a black mark on young Master Chong's face right from the start. How were they going to groom him in the future? In front of so many old brothers, where would he put his old face? I don't know what that lad said to bewitch all of you. In any case, I don't understand a single word he said. It's impossible for me to acknowledge him as my young master. The stubborn and haughty young lady harumphed. With a fling of her ponytail, she ignored her grandfather, turned around, and walked away by herself. She left Old Man Yi standing there awkwardly. His face turned purple, and he raised his hands several times before putting it down. He couldn't bear to hit her. It was undeniable that this child was arrogant and rebellious. She wouldn't listen to his advice at all. However, her talent was really high. Moreover, as a girl, she was really hardworking. She didn't even need to be urged. She just practiced on her own and forgot to eat and sleep. Even as her grandfather, he couldn't find any fault with her. There were many times when he saw her working so hard that her hands were bleeding, but she didn't make a sound at all. His heart ached for her. Sigh, I really don't know what to do with her. Elder Ye's heart ached and he was angry at the same time. He turned around and looked at his old brothers, speechless. The conference hall fell silent for a moment before a deafening laughter burst out. Old Man Yi, to think that you would have such a day. To think that you would be unable to subdue a 16 to 17-year-old granddaughter. Dragons give birth to dragons and phoenixes give birth to phoenixes. With that old fellow's personality, it's no wonder he gave birth to such a temperamental granddaughter. After knowing that old fellow for so long, this is the first time I've seen him so embarrassed. That old fellow can't bear to hit her. I wonder who will be able to tame the Yi family's phoenix daughter in the future? That child sure has character. I wonder if she's compatible with our young Master Chong? Initially, the elders in the conference hall were still mocking Yi Dong, but for some reason, the topic suddenly changed to Wang Chong. Wang Chong's face reddened in embarrassment. Young Master Chong, I'm really sorry. Pinger has been spoiled by me since young, and she's getting more and more lawless. I'll teach her a lesson when we return. Having embarrassed Wang Chong so greatly, Elder Yi hurried over to apologize. "It's nothing, old man Yi, you don't have to mind it." Wang Chong waved his hands casually, not paying the matter any heed. He had interacted with Yi Yinping in his previous life, so he knew what kind of person she was. Even though she was talented in martial arts, she was just like other girls. She was innately uninterested in politics. When he spoke about the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate and tariffs, she was probably completely clueless. Even if he asked her whether the Abbasid Caliphate and Karak's Spazinu were in the East or West, she would probably still be at a loss. It would be a miracle if his previous performance won her respect. A headstrong girl like Yi Yinping would only submit to an expert stronger than her. Just like what she said, how could an Origin Energy Tier 5 or 6 weakling be worthy of her calling him young master? Since you refuse to submit, I'll beat you into submission. One day, you'll willingly acknowledge me as your young master. Wang Chong chuckled. In his previous life, he suffered under Yinping's hands. This talented young lady of the Yi family seemed to despise her grandfather for being inferior to the old master, and she was unwilling to lower her head before the Wang family. Thus, in his previous life, she tried her best to find trouble with him. However, in this life, if Yi Yinping still wanted to regain her sense of existence from him, it wouldn't be that easy. With such thoughts in mind, Wang Chong turned around and walked out. It was a huge harvest for him to get to know his brother from his previous life, Zhao Jingdian. However, Wang Chong didn't show too much enthusiasm. After all, the current Zhao Jingdian still didn't know why he felt so close to him. Wait a moment. Outside the erudite pavilion, just as Wang Chong was about to walk to a fake mountain, a voice suddenly sounded behind him. Hearing this voice, Wang Chong's footsteps abruptly halted. "Why are you helping me?" A voice sounded behind him. "What?" Wang Chong turned around and stared in astonishment at cousin Wang Li, who was looking at him with a dark expression. You can't be thinking that I'm really that foolish that I can't even remember what I said, right? Besides, I have never rested on a fake mountain. You might be able to fool others, but you can't fool me," cousin Wang Li said. As he had fallen from a fake mountain when he was young, he had a trauma in his heart. Even though he didn't fear a fake mountain when he grew up, from then on, Wang Li didn't like climbing on fake mountains. Wang Li didn't tell anyone about this matter. At the start, when Wang Chong said that he had heard it from him, he had almost believed it. However, when he heard that he was resting on a fake mountain, he knew that it was all nonsense from Wang Chong. Is that so? Then I might have remembered it wrongly. Perhaps I heard it from somewhere else." Wang Chong chuckled. He didn't change his words. In an instant, the surroundings of the bamboo forest fell silent. Wang Li stared deeply at Wang Chong. His eyes flickered, as though he was meeting this cousin of his for the first time. But soon, Wang Li's expression turned cold, and he reverted back to his usual self. Don't think that I will appreciate your favor just because you helped me. You think that you're so smart," Wang Li said coldly, but his expression was much gentler. He wasn't as distant as when he first met Wang Chong. With that, he turned around and quickly disappeared into the bamboo forest. "You're still as cold on the outside but warm on the inside." Wang Chong chuckled. Looking at his cousin's departing back, a surge of warmth flowed through his heart. He was exactly as he remembered. Even though his cousin's view of him had changed, he would never admit to it. Thinking so, Wang Chong turned around and walked toward his mother. At the same time, in another room of the erudite pavilion, after the grandchildren and Wang Chong left, the subordinates of the old masters gathered in another room and did not leave. "What do you think of Duke Jiu's grandson?" Elder Yi was the first to speak. As brothers of several decades, they could tell what each other was thinking just by looking at each other. Without a doubt, after this meeting, everyone wanted to gather together to discuss the matter. Smart, quick-witted, insightful, and courageous. More importantly, he has a heart that loves his country to the core. Elder Ma said. He recalled Wang Chong's words in the main hall. It didn't matter what Wang Chong said or how he said it. What was more important was that he could sense a patriotic heart from Wang Chong. When he spoke of the regional commander system and the Hu people system, Perhaps even he himself didn't realize the sincerity he unintentionally revealed, the sympathy he felt for the common people, and the worry he felt for the empire's crisis. From the interaction in the conference hall, Wang Chong could tell that Duke Jiu's grandson was smart, quick-witted, courageous, strategic, and talented in leadership. However, these talents could be used for both good and bad. For example, a sword could be used to harm others, but it could also be used to harm oneself. Compared to courage, talent, and leadership, what they valued more was Wang Chong's courage and the sincerity of his patriotism. Wang Chong couldn't have known that the reason why everyone acknowledged him wasn't because of the regional commander's system or the Hu system, but because of his patriotism. To the weather-beaten elders, this was more precious than anything else. At the end of the Eastern Han Dynasty, the divination master Su Xiao met Cao Cao and said that he was a capable official who governed the world and a treacherous hero in troubled times. At the very least, with young Master Chang's talent, we don't have to worry about him becoming a treacherous hero. Elder Sun said. Of everyone present, he was the last to acknowledge Wang Chong. The elders in the hall nodded their heads in agreement. Quick-witted, courageous, insightful, and talented in leadership. Furthermore, he had a patriotic heart, and he wouldn't bring disaster to the empire. In the eyes of the elders, this was the person whom the Wang clan could truly unite and acknowledge. After more than a decade of disappointment, all of Duke Jiu's descendants had finally found a person whom they could follow. Duke Jiu has a successor. He's passed our test. However, the true test has only just begun. Whether he can win the acknowledgement of Duke Jiu's old friends or not will depend on his performance in the future. This is the true test, and no one will be able to help him on this point. Listen to his words and observe his actions. What he says isn't important, what's important is what he does. The one testing him this time will be the talents of the world. Duke Jiu is already old, and I hope that this child can pass the test. This way, our Central Plains will be able to produce another talent, and the Tang dynasty will be able to continue on for another 100 years. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.